Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to completely shatter the myth that you need unlimited resources to achieve greatness. We'll be pulling some fascinating insights from the YouTube channel Mindset Elevation. Have you ever wondered how Isaac Newton developed calculus during a plagued quarantine? Or how Nikola Tesla designed entire complex machines just in his head simply because he couldn't afford to build prototypes? Right, we usually think scarcity holds people back, but as you'll see, constraint actually forces your brain into this incredible state of focus, creativity, and sheer depth.
Okay, let's dive right in by looking at what we usually believe about freedom versus the stark reality. The myth tells us that creativity needs absolute freedom, right? Unlimited options, endless resources, every tool under the sun. But the reality? Unlimited options actually paralyze your brain. Psychologists call this the paradox of choice. So instead of freeing you up, having infinite possibilities literally freezes your decision-making. You stop asking, what can I do? And you just get stuck endlessly spinning your wheels, wondering, wait, what should I do?
And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates how severe limitation forces absolute precision instead of lazy thinking. Just think about the Apollo 13 oxygen crisis. NASA engineers didn't have access to some state-of-the-art manufacturing lab in space to fix the problem. No way. They had a plastic bag, some duct tape, and cardboard. That severe constraint radically narrowed their search space. Their brains had to stop wandering and just start solving. If they had unlimited resources, well, they might have fallen into overcomplicated, lazy thinking, but scarcity forced sheer genius.
So, we are going to map this all out across 4 key areas for you. 1. The paradox of choice. 2. Why scarcity creates genius. 3. The artificial scarcity protocol. And finally, 4. How constraints force originality.
Starting off with Section 1, the paradox of choice. Options equal paralysis. To put this into perspective, let's look at the famous Columbia University jam study. Researchers set up 2 tables in a grocery store. One table was packed with 24 different types of jam, and the other had just 6. Now, that massive table attracted a ton of attention. But get this, almost nobody actually bought anything. When you're faced with 24 options, that massive search space just short-circuits your brain and stalls execution. But the table with only 6 jams? Massive sales. The takeaway here is that when you can do anything, you very often do absolutely nothing. It's why writers stare at blank pages, designers freeze up, and programmers with endless frameworks never actually write a single line of code.
Moving to Section 2, why scarcity creates genius, the constrained brain.
So when you have millions of sources right at your fingertips, YouTube, Google, AI, you actually suffer from what psychologist Betsy Sparrow calls the Google effect. It's this wild phenomenon where your brain just straight up refuses to store information because it knows, hey, I can always just look this up later. We skim, we bookmark, and then we completely forget. Scarcity actually removes that escape hatch. When you don't have endless search capabilities, you're forced to actually internalize the knowledge.
And to counter this Google effect, elite performers practice something called cognitive compression. See, a novice brain tries to store thousands of loose, raw facts individually, but an expert brain, like a highly trained surgeon, compresses that data. They aren't memorizing isolated facts. They're taking complex information and zipping it into internalized models and patterns. It's literally like creating a zip file on your computer. And scarcity is what forces this compression. Think about it. If you only have 3 books instead of 200, you're going to read them 10 times, extract the core ideas, and burn them into your memory.
This naturally translates right into our work habits. Scarcity plunges you directly into what author Cal Newport famously calls deep work. We're talking about sustained focus, completely without distraction. Most people never actually experience this because their environment never forces it. But when you strip away all the alternatives and you have absolutely nothing but a single problem right in front of you, well, that is exactly where deep work and, honestly, genius begins to form.
Furthermore, this kind of motivation literally changes your brain chemistry. Psychologist Robert Bjork calls this desirable difficulty. Basically, when learning feels really hard and the stakes are high, your brain activates a sort of survival encoding. It makes the memory permanent. Think about Malcolm X in prison. Feeling totally humiliated by his inability to write letters, he rewrote his entire mind by copying a dictionary, word by word. I mean, the stakes were incredibly real. Scarcity created the stakes, and the stakes created an obsession that transformed mild interest into absolute permanent mastery.
All right, Section 3, the artificial scarcity protocol, the 3-step protocol.
This brings us to the absolute core of this explainer. This is the step-by-step guide used by elite performers to eliminate distractions and seriously accelerate their output. It's broken down into 3 steps: limiting core resources, time compression, and environmental constraint. Let's break down exactly how you can implement this protocol in your own life immediately.
Step 1 is the 3-resource rule. This is all about strictly defining and limiting your core resources. So instead of hoarding dozens of open tabs, a massive pile of books, and endless tutorials, you have to limit yourself to exactly 3. That's it. 3 books, 3 courses, or 3 tools. When you artificially restrict your resources to just 3, your brain stops skimming and is forced into deep mastery. You end up going an inch wide, but a mile deep.
Step 2 is time compression, where you set aggressive time constraints. Look, have you ever told yourself you'll finish a project eventually? Yeah, well, eventually never arrives. Parkinson's law states that work expands to fill the time available. So if you give yourself months, you're going to get lazy execution. But if you shrink that deadline all the way down to just 24 hours, like engineers do in hackathons or journalists racing a breaking news deadline, your brain becomes ruthlessly efficient. There's no overthinking, just pure execution.
And step 3 focuses on environmental constraint. Your physical surroundings completely dictate your focus. There's this fascinating University of Texas study that found just having your phone visible on your desk physically reduces your cognitive capacity. You aren't even using it, but just seeing it drains your brain. So you have to brutally isolate yourself. Lock your phone in a drawer. Fire up those internet blockers. You want to simulate a highly constrained environment where there's no escape. It's just you and the task.
Which leads us to Section 4, how constraints force originality. Invention over imitation.
You see, when you have unlimited resources and tools, human nature just naturally takes over and your thinking becomes lazy. We all default to copying existing templates because, well, why invent something completely new when existing solutions are right there? But scarcity removes those templates. You can't copy what you don't have access to. Stripping away those tools forces your brain to build entirely new solutions. Imitation basically becomes impossible, so invention has to take its place. And history proves this time and again across literally every industry. Look at music. Hip-hop wasn't born in multi-million-dollar studios, right? It was born from broken turntables, cheap equipment, and artists inventing scratching and looping out of sheer limitation. Or look at technology. Early video game developers had severe memory limits, so they couldn't store massive graphics. The result? They invented pixel art, an entirely new visual language. Even in cinema, some of the most iconic, creative camera angles come directly from directors working with severely low budgets. They didn't have the advantages, so they used their limitations as leverage.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this final thought. Most people are just sitting around consuming information, endlessly scrolling, waiting for the perfect conditions to finally start their work. But as we've seen today, perfect conditions will never produce genius. Constraint does. The people who build extraordinary skills are the ones who deliberately learn to operate without advantages. So the question is, how are you going to design your own artificial scarcity today?